Ridding the world of terrible websites. That's Jeffro's goal, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this chapter of the business library, along with making sure you're not on the list, what you actually have to do not to be on that list, and what you can do to actually make your website convert so it pays for itself. That's the goal of most websites and paying, well, actually returning some investment. And of course, our free courses are down below to start investing and starting content marketing. And whilst you're down in the description checking those out, Jeffro's links are also down there, so make sure to check them out if you hear something that you like. And just to start us off, what made you start on this goal of wanting to rid the world of terrible websites?
Well, I think it's something that we're all frustrated with from now and again. We do so much of our lives online now, whether it's business or personal stuff, we're always online and we deal with websites every day. And there's frustrating ones where you're just trying to get some basic task done, like paying an invoice or something, you can't get it to work, or maybe you're trying to get someone shared something with you and now you have to create an account, and there's all these annoying things, or maybe there's pop-ups. You're just trying to read an article that someone was sending to you, or you need it for a report and you can't even, it's bogging down your computer because you're like, okay, is this installing malware on? We've seen all the bad websites, right? They add stress to our lives, they waste our time. And so that's kind of what I wanted to give back to the world, is help people understand how to make better websites, get rid of some of the bad ones so that our daily online existence can be just a little bit better.
Yeah, there's a lot of time wasted on bad websites.
Yes.
I think it's quite scary if you actually count up the number, if you ever could. I'm curious to know about it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it's one of those things you don't want to know. You don't want to know. So, what is when people go and make a website? What are some of the things that makes for a terrible website that they don't think about? It's not that obvious.
Sure. Well, good question. And I want to clarify to say that I usually talk about business websites, because a business website has a certain goal to it, and there's a certain way you should do it to make sure you're not hurting yourself or shooting yourself in the foot. Now, if you got a personal website, you're doing a blog, do whatever you want. It's your site, have fun with it. But if you're making a business website, it needs to be doing its job as a member of the business, right? It should be doing something, whether that's attracting people or converting visitors into prospects, getting them to call you or download a free guide so that now they're on your email list, whatever it is. You need to know ahead of time when you're building the site what it's for, and then you can actually evaluate if it's actually doing that for you. So a startup might be building a website that's designed for investors. And so maybe you craft the messaging and the visuals for them, the things that they care about. You highlight the business plan or how much money you're going to make, etc. That's different than if you've got an e-commerce site and you're trying to get people to buy stuff, right? You're going to be highlighting certain products, maybe showing them the current deal that's going on, getting them to click on that. And you have different psychological methods maybe that you're employing. And then there's sites where it's just for current customers. Maybe you're not trying to sell them, you're just providing additional resources. And so knowing this up front is kind of the step one of making a good website. Because if you say, I'm going to make a site for my customers to pay stuff, but you never talk to your customers or ask them how frustrating it is to actually get in there and pay a bill, you're going to have problems. So it's just knowing that and then evaluating it from that standpoint, and that helps you move forward. But we can dive into other areas too if you want.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very, very good point you made to start off with. Actually knowing what your website is made for.
Yeah.
Thinking back of making my first business website, I just realized why it was so bad. Because the purpose kind of just got made up as, oh, this looks nice, and there was not really a clear plan and goal to what to actually do with the website.
Right. I think what most people do is they just think, all right, I need a website. And so they put up, here's my logo, here's my name. We do XYZ. Call us. Okay. It's maybe an online business card, but if you wanted to actually get people interested in your services, you got to do a little bit more than that. Think of it from their perspective, how it helps them, how it draws them in and makes them curious about why you're different than somebody else. Because if all you're doing is talking about yourself, like, okay, I've seen these guys before, I get these messages all the time, pass, right? They're on to the next thing. So that's why it matters.
Yeah. Is there a specific mistake that people make that get on your nerves?
I think not having some call to action kind of, I mean, it's a
Good
peeve, I
point.
guess. It doesn't get me mad or anything, but it's just like, come on, guys. Like, you put all this effort into getting a site up. You even talked about, how you can help, but then you don't put any next steps. Like, why? You're losing so much opportunity here because you're not putting a button that says, if this sounds like something you want, call us. Or if you're in the neighborhood, stop by our store, whatever it is. Give people that next step. Tell them what to do. People want to know what's next, especially if they liked what you had to offer. And so a lot of people just don't do that, and it kind of boggles my mind.
Yeah, making it easy for the consumer. I have the same
Yeah.
thing when it comes to social media and people don't have a clear CTA. Just tell
Yep.
people what to do because otherwise they get confused. We don't
Yeah.
all assume the same things.
I'm still working on that on my social media. I'm getting better at it, though.
Yeah, well, at least you know it. And I don't think, and I think it's the same for website, at least in my opinion. You don't want to over spam your website with CTAs. I
Mhm.
don't mind that you have a couple, but don't have it under every paragraph.
Right.
Like, just don't have it under every post. Like, go click this.
Agreed.
People
And
get
that's a good point. You don't want to annoy your visitors. They're not going to like you if you do that. So you got to find that balance of being helpful, but also kind of guiding the way forward without being in their face like, hey, you ready to buy it now? How about now? Right? Like, it's like, okay, whoa, back off. And so just kind of think of it from that perspective. How are you coming on too strong?
and kind of going into what doesn't make a website work. It's only natural to talk a bit about some good strategies to actually what to put on a website. Is
Mm-hmm.
it just nice, pretty pictures? Is it some good copy? A little video?
Well, I mean, that's kind of, in a way, that's oversimplifying it, but at the same time, like, those are the elements on the site, but how you choose to put them on there and the type of things that the way you put it together matters. So when we do a website for someone, we actually start with the messaging, the copy. We have a form we go through, we ask them a bunch of questions about their business, who their target customer is, what makes them different, so that we can understand that. And then we can write messaging that's going to connect with that target customer in a way that highlights the offer that they have and how it helps the needs of that target customer. Because now when they read that page, they're going to connect with it immediately and understand, like, hey, I'm in the right place. I'm going to keep reading and see, what the price is or how I can contact them. Can I get a quote or anything like that? But if you just start by talking about yourself, that's not going to work. So we start with messaging, figure that out. Then we move on to the design. And the design should really just be there to support the messaging. It shouldn't be distracting in the sense that people are focused more on, ooh, that's a cool animation, right? Who cares, right? That doesn't help them buy. Like, you want just enough to let people know we're professional, we do things right, but it's not going to be the focus of the visit, right? I think a lot of people get distracted or caught up in the like, oh, that's a really cool, nifty slider thing. It can go all the way around and add, like, doesn't matter, man. If you've got a slider with 15 images in it, nobody's going to see more than the first two. They're going to scroll. They're not sitting around. All you're doing is adding more load time to your website. So that's why design comes after the messaging. It's there just as a supportive function. And then lastly, it's implementing the site, making sure it's implemented efficiently with properly sized images. You've got good hosting that's quick. You maybe got a CDN to help files load faster, and you're secure. You've got your firewall. That's all, the technical stuff to take care of. But in terms of making an effective business website, got to get the messaging first and foremost, and then the design just helps with that. But if you've got bad messaging and good design, it's not going to save you. That if you have good messaging and design, you'll still be okay because the messaging is the most important part.
Yeah, makes good sense. A pretty picture won't save you from just having a bunch of scrambled scribbles. And if you don't want people to go, I love the example of like the pretty animation because I can imagine myself nearly like a butterfly flying past. Oh,
Yeah.
butterfly! I'm like, then I'm completely distracted onto the next thing. But going into messaging, like, is there some specific strategies in regards of messaging, or is it really niche specific?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. The strategies are like really, really understanding your customer, what pains they have, what problems they have, and how your solutions help them. And that's why we have our long form. We ask a bunch of questions. We talk about this with our clients on our first, deep dive call. That's the process. Is you really have to take the time to do that, and most people don't. They're just like, oh well, anybody can use my service. Anybody can have it. Like, well, that's great, but let's get specific here for a minute. Who do you help most often, or what is the? You kind of have to create this avatar to describe that person. And if you have trouble doing that, then step one would be going back to your past customers and saying, hey, why did you pick us? What was it about us that made us stand out? Or what did you like about working with us? Would you hire us again? Why not? Like asking those kinds of questions, you'll get some great answers that gives you insight into the way they think as clients. And then you can even take those phrases that they put in their feedback surveys, and some of them turn into headlines, right? Because like, oh, I hired you guys because, boom, headline. They're the quickest, most on time, best deal, whatever it happens to be that they care about. And that can be really specific. And that's part of knowing your niche too, right? Instead of appealing to everyone, if you appeal to this small group, you're going to get way more business in most cases, because those people are going to be like, yes, I want to hire you. You know exactly what I need, as opposed to the ones that's more generic. And you're like, we can help everyone. Okay. I mean, you'll get some business, but does that answer the question?
Definitely. And
Okay.
that's just about, I like the business advice within itself of go down niche specific.
Mm-hmm.
Every niche, the more specific you go, the more you get paid most of the time, if there's enough people needing the service.
And let me point out one more thing too. So I talked about how the design supports the messaging, right? And you don't want it to distract from it. So let's say you figured that out. Let's say you're a mental health clinic and you want to connect with people who need help. Maybe they're depressed or anxious or something like that. The way you write your copy needs to be a little more gentle, right? You don't want to push people too hard. You want them to feel like this is a trusted space where they can come in and see that you're going to help them and you know how to do it. You've done this before, and give them some kind of hope, right? Now, let's say you write those words really well, but then you pick some stock photos that are like people in an office and they're like, all these like really hokey poses, and it creates a disconnect with the messaging that can still turn people off. So instead, you either need to do your own photo shoot, or you work really hard to find the pictures that are more warm, that kind of capture that interaction between a trusted therapist and a patient, or seeing someone really happy after finally, having a breakthrough. Like this, and even the colors that you pick in the design can clash with the message, right? If you've had all this warm messaging, but then it's all black and white, okay, that might not really feel right. So maybe we have some softer colors to help come in there. And so these are things that people don't consciously think about, but they experience as they visit your website. And so that's what I mean when I'm talking about you get the message first, and then the design helps support that and not distract from it.
Yeah, I call a thing like a lot of the time, like picking colors. It's like, I picked it because I liked it.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that I've done the same thing myself. And then kind of switching up as realizing what works better.
Yeah.
One thing in the regards I wanted to ask, because you spoke about client feedback, is there other ways you like to go about getting feedback, let's say, from maybe a new potential audience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's say if you're brand new to the business, you don't have customers yet. You can basically steal this information from others on the internet. Like if you go on Quora, search and see what's there, you could post a question if it's not there, or you can read ones that have been posted before. Somebody's asked the question like, how do I know which drywaller to pick? Or how do I know when to hire a bookkeeper? Whatever. See what people say. Another place you can go is Amazon. Read the customer reviews of certain books that are related to your service. See what people say. oh, I really liked how this book talked about XYZ because, when I hired my contractor, they did this and I forgot to check their license. Like, okay, there's so much information on the internet. Go on Reddit, go on these subreddits that talk about these particular industries or niches and read what people say. So if you don't have your own customers, just read what other people are putting on the internet. And now we even have ChatGPT, right? Like, so you have no excuse. You can ask ChatGPT. That's a starting point. Like, it's never going to replace having real feedback from people, but that can be a starting point. You can even ask it for ideas like, hey, what sites can I go look at to get some information from potential customers for my carpet business or whatever?
Yeah, I really hope ChatGPT doesn't catch up to the real world, because it's going to put the business library out of commission. It's going to be gone. If it goes live updates, there's going to be no reason for it.
Well, I think there's always going to be a reason for having the human touch. People, in the studies that have been done, people prefer reading human written content to AI content by like 4 times. So it hasn't gotten to that point yet where it's indistinguishable from people, because people have stories and experiences. ChatGPT doesn't. It's just imitating what it thinks someone would write, and that ends up being okay, pretty good, helpful, but not the same as a real human.
It really does like emojis.
I know.
AI really likes. You need to chill out with the emojis. I see all those emojis. I'm like, yeah, AI. Talking about AI, in what aspects do you use AI, if you even use AI for website building and creation?
Really, for a website, a business website, it's usually all custom. But if someone says, "Hey, I've got a budget, I can't afford a whole custom website," and then I'll say, "Okay, for a few $100, I've got an AI tool that can spit out a website for you." It's not going to be as good as the others, but it's a starting point, right? You can work on it as you grow and improve it over time, because a website's never done, and so you might as well start with something decent, and that'll save you all the hassle of trying to come up with your own copy and pick out some stock photos and stuff. It's just a faster way to kind of get started. But just as long as you understand what it is, right? This is kind of just a quick starter website. Sure, that can be helpful.
Yeah, actually, they do quite a good job of it.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's really not that bad.
Most unprofessional people can do.
Yeah, but what you won't have is the stuff that I talked about, right? The specific messaging that really captures what you need to do to connect with that customer, and then the design to support that message. So you'll get something that looks like a decent website, but it's those little things that are going to make the difference when it comes to actually conversion for those customers.
Yeah, it's when I do use AI to like generate clips and I get it to generate B-roll, like 80% of it is going because it doesn't fit. It shows like a completely different thing. But it's a good idea of like at least getting some inspiration and getting some insights of, okay, what kind of B-roll style can we kind of go with, and then you have something to search with, so you don't start with the whole library. One thing I think you can't speak about when talking about having terrible websites and creating great websites is what's a good website host, because that makes a massive difference, actually having a good load time. Like the worst thing that can happen is saying like, this website is not working because it's so slow, and then they're gone.
Yep. Yeah, and that's actually a ranking factor. Google tells us they care about load time, and obviously people care about it because everybody's got fast schedules. They don't have time to wait around. They don't care how much time you put into creating that cool animation, right? So it's got to come up quickly. Now, for us at Frobro, we have our own hosting so that we can make sure all our sites are fast and secure and everything. But a couple of things you want to look for in a host, especially if you're using something like WordPress. We have hosting that's designed specifically for WordPress. It's optimized for that. We've got the database set up. We've got our firewall, got our automated scans, everything built for WordPress. Plus, we have dedicated resources for each site, meaning it's not shared hosting. So I know it's tempting to go to the cheapest option on GoDaddy or whatever, and it's this economy hosting. Like, wow, that's really cheap. And it's cheap for a reason. So number one is performance, right? What happens is you're essentially sharing the engine of your website with other websites. If you were a race car, you're sharing the same engine across multiple race cars, which doesn't work. It might be fine if these ones are idling and you want to go for a while, But if those ones are more popular than yours and they're using the engine a lot, and then someone tries to go to your site, it's not going to load very quickly. So that's kind of my analogy there of like the shared resources and why that matters. But it also matters for security, not just speed, because if one of these sites is compromised, all right, now the hacker goes over one folder to yours, and now you're compromised too. So if you've got it siloed off with dedicated resources, then you're going to be more secure because you can implement your own practices, making sure you've got two-factor authentication and firewall, whatever else. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. Now you have your own controlled space that you can defend and protect and optimize.
Yeah, especially if to the European person that listening to this, they can definitely relate if they have just read a bit of European law and stuff about privacy. That you don't want shared hosting. That can be your most expensive mistake ever, probably.
Yeah,
and
you're not going to get great customer support on those cheap plans either, because you're at the lowest tier of priority. They don't really care. They kind of avoid helping you as much as possible. Unfortunately,
I guess that they're just getting you in the door so they can upsell you in the future and one out the plan. So right now they're not making any money off you, so they don't want to spend any money on you neither.
Exactly.
And yeah, that website speed, I was actually baffled why our website never got viewed back when we used Squarespace. Right up until I checked the speed and I was like, wait, what? So I'll definitely recommend you to go out to Google's website speed check and actually check it, because your version might be preloaded, so it just loads like this. But for a new person, it takes an age, or it might just take very long for your phone and not for your PC, which is, I don't know how that much impacts Google's ranking for search across the field, actually.
Well, yeah, if you and another site were all other things equal, but yours loads faster, then you would rank higher. So it's a factor. It's not the only factor, but it is something that Google cares about. And you just have to remember, maybe you have high-speed internet. Maybe your customers don't. And so when you pull up your site, it comes up pretty quickly. But then when they load it, it's just super slow. And that's because maybe they're in a neighborhood that doesn't have good internet speeds. And so that's something else you should know. Where are your customers? What is the experience they're going through? Because you might be surprised if you do that survey, like, what do you think of our website? And everybody's like, so slow. You're like, oh, really? Maybe I got to fix that.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Definitely something I've become aware of it after doing this podcast in regards of upload speed, and you need to be careful with people that have too slow internet. And you need, at least you need to time it, because you need time to upload afterwards.
Yeah. Also, knowing if people are visiting your website on a desktop browser or on your mobile phone, that matters too, because maybe you haven't optimized your site to look good on mobile. But if you have a lot of visitors on mobile to your site, okay, maybe you should do something about that. Also, the speed on the phone, again, might be different than the speed on the desktop site. A lot of people have never looked at the mobile version of their site because they built it on their desktop because that's just where they do their work. It doesn't even occur to them. But a lot of customers come through mobile. So stuff like that makes a big difference.
And that's only going to increase.
Yeah.
So it keeps ramping up year on year and year. And is there, when it comes to actually building a good website, how do you actually go about building a process on a website that's going to make a person trust you enough to actually hand over money so you can convert?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it goes back to understanding the customer and their needs and their pain points. If you communicate effectively to that, to let them understand you know what they're dealing with and you know how to fix it, and you've fixed it before, you've got reviews that say you had a great experience, that's what makes them trust you. And so that's why that piece is so important. Like, sure, you can do other things. Not everyone's going to be sold on day one. And so that's why it can be helpful to have a lead magnet or kind of a next step to say, hey, well, if you're ready to book a call, here you go. If you want to learn more, click this for a free guide on what to look for when hiring, a painter or whatever it is. And so now you provide them a little bit more value, give them just a little more hint of what we do, why you can trust us, we know what we're doing, and now they're in your ecosystem, and you can follow up with them later. They see that you're still providing a way forward for them, even if they're not sold on day one. So get the messaging right, and then provide a path forward, multiple paths, depending on where they're at.
Yeah, and as many mediums as possible, because if you send the book over my way, I'm not going to read it. It's not happening. I don't have a fun time. It ruins my day, and I'm not going to remember a thing of what I just read. Send an audiobook my way. I'm like, oh, I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, if we want to take a step back for a minute and talk about like part of the reason marketing is hard for people is they want it to be just kind of a quick, easy, I do this, I get that, right? New customer, better website, lots of customers, I'm done. I never have to think about it again. But it doesn't really work like that. You know, you have to understand the different buyer stages, right? Because you might have someone who's indifferent. They don't know they have a problem. They don't need a solution. And you go up to them on the street and you're like, hey, you want to upgrade your cabinets? They're like, no, I'm good, right? But then maybe the next step is they're sold on the need. Like, you know what? I need some new cabinets. These things are starting to fall apart. But I don't know if I want to do that yet, right? Maybe they realize they want it, but they're not ready to spend money on it, or they don't know how they're going to go about it. So the next stage is maybe they're sold on your concept of how you do things. And so like, okay, I need new cabinets and I'm going to hire a contractor to do it. I'm not going to do it myself. But I'm just going to like refinish the ones I have. I don't want new ones built. And you're like, hey, that's what I do. Great. But then the last step is not only are they sold on your concept, but they're sold on your brand as opposed to someone else's. So, and they know they want cabinets. They know how they want it. And now they're picking you because you have communicated to them the most effectively. Maybe you had the best reviews. Maybe your site spoke to them specifically about their concerns. Like, oh, I was worried that it's going to take, 3 months to get done. And you're guaranteeing that it's only going to be done in 2 weeks or something. Like, that's the stuff that's going to sell them. And so knowing those different stages, those can be attacked at different areas in the buyer journey, right? Some of that might be attacked on the website, the homepage, to kind of educate them and why you guys need new cabinets, or it's going to be affordable even though you think it might not be. And then maybe they get on your email list, you talk a little bit more about that and you kind of nurture them along. Sometimes you do Facebook ads and retargeting, right? So maybe somebody saw your ad, but they didn't click through yet. So you run a different ad that speaks a little bit to the needs. And this is why marketing gets complicated and people are like, this is too much, right? But it can be simplified by getting that messaging done right. The website is the hub of all the marketing efforts. So that's why it's so important to get that right, because any campaign that you run, any email that you send, any post on social media, it's all going to link back to the website. So you need to do that piece right before you spend money on the other things. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting your money.
Yeah, people do actually check your website,
yes.
Especially if you have an email with your website handle at the end.
Yep. I do that all the time.
Because my private email has my last name, .net, and because my uncle set that up, and he probably played around with building like the free website that was with that, whatever. I never knew in my life. But because people actually search that goddamn thing, I've gotten a question about something about a law firm. I was like, wait, what? And I never knew that website existed. But just because of that little thing at the end of your email, people will go search you.
Yep.
And they will search you for, anything else. They will go check what Google actually has to say about you.
I mean, your website is your first impression to the world. It's your digital business card. It's your online storefront. So the impression that you want to make on people, okay, how much effort do you want to put into that first impression? Probably a decent amount, right? If you're going for a job interview, you spend a lot of time on your resume before submitting an application. You don't just hand write something on a piece of paper like, I did this for 5 years and I like doing this, so I can hand it to them. No, you put time and effort into it so that when they see it, they're like, wow, you want them to have a great reaction like, oh, cool, I want to learn more. Website's the same way. If they get there and it looks like it was built in the 90s on Angel Fire and it's got like those GeoCities, like animations in the corner, like, okay, I'm going to be like, you're not with the times. Maybe I'm going to keep looking. And even if it's not true, right? Even if you know what you're doing, you're really good at it, people are going to judge you by the website. And so that's why it's so important to get it right and make it at least look decent, right? We talked about having an AI website. That's better than having some old thing that you haven't touched in forever, or that you just got some free template that you didn't put any thought into. So it's your first impression. Do it right.
And talking about making a great first impression and having great messaging, you're a great example of that yourself. When I was reading through your stuff, like reading about this podcast, I was like, this is on point. I love this. Like you incorporated your afro into your branding, and it's kind of hinted at throughout the entire thing. It's not just like a thing that's within the name. Like it's really thought out. That made me want to ask you a question in regards to how you make your clients have a great time. Because one thing that I thought about when I read your branding, that I kind of got the vibe was, this guy is a blast to work with. And I once had a conversation with a tax advisor. Like, his only difference in the market was actually making him enjoyable to speak to.
Nice.
So
well,
it's
there's
very
some
important.
businesses like that are kind of commoditized, and so having an interesting brand sets you apart, right? If
Yeah.
there's nothing else to choose, of course I'm going to pick the fun guy over the boring guy. I'm still going to get my taxes done, right? I want the fun guy. It makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly.
Well,
So
and I'm glad you mentioned my website too, because it takes a long time to get there, right? If you've never tried to do this and figure out, why am I different, or what do I want my brand to be about, it's worth doing that work, because it's hard. Like, it's actually way easier for me to help a client figure this out, because I can see what they're good at and the complaints or whatever. I can highlight that for them. Doing it for myself, really hard. And when I do a client website, 6 weeks, end to end, messaging, design, implemented, done. My site took me I don't know, 6 months on and off of rewriting, trying to change the design, trying to get it right, and fighting with it. But I think that's the way it is for all of us. If you're doing your own site, you're really close to it, and you can't see what other people see. And so that's why it's helpful to have a professional to help you with it. So I actually didn't even do everything myself for my own site, because I knew I would have trouble with it. So I had my copywriters write the copy. I had designers come up with this, and I had to work with them and grapple with it, and that's not exactly what I wanted, but I'm having trouble articulating it. And so you just have to go through that process and get there. And then you have to hit publish at some point, because it's never going to be perfect, and you can always improve it later. But you do need to at least put in effort up front to get to that point where you're going to connect to your audience. Otherwise, what's the point?
exactly. And talking about your website, besides that, that's of course going to be linked below. Is there any other things people could check out if they really enjoyed our conversation today? Because there's still a lot more to learn. We didn't have time to cover it.
Yeah, I post a lot on LinkedIn, and so you can connect with me there. Just search for Jeffro. And I'm starting to post more on Instagram as well. So at jeffro.official or at FroBroWeb for the business channel. And that's where the podcast episodes go as well for my podcast, Digital Dominance.
So we'll of course have all of that stuff down below. And Jeffro, thank you very much for coming on today and having an amazing conversation with me about websites. I definitely learned a few things I never thought about.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Mads.